The drums started before dawn, not the polished parade drums of royal ceremony, but deep, war-skinned thunder rolling across the stone terraces of Vera's capital like a heartbeat too large for one city to hold. Every strike rattled banners, lantern chains, and the nerves of anyone born with enough sense to fear what the day might become. Cade Mercer stood at the north gate in a borrowed formal coat that didn't fit his shoulders and watched the sunrise stain the sky copper red. He had crossed 3 systems for this wedding and expected trouble. He had not expected to be part of it. "Stop flexing," muttered Sima, his translator and the closest thing he had to a friend on Vera. "You look like you're preparing to headbutt a wall." Cade glanced down. She was right. His fists were half-clenched, tendons tight under old scar tissue. He forced his hands open. "I'm not flexing," he said. "You are," she replied. "And if you tear the sleeves of that coat, I am not sewing them." Cade gave a quiet snort. "Couldn't afford your rates anyway." Sima adjusted the silver relay at her throat, the little disc that made her words clean in his ear and his words smooth in hers. Her own ceremonial robes were layered in dark blue and gold, a scholar's trim with the seal of House Tareth at the cuffs. She looked exactly like what she was: educated, calm, diplomatic. Cade looked like a bodyguard who had gotten lost and wandered into an aristocratic invitation list. Technically was true. "You remember the rules?" she asked, voice low. "No challenging anyone, no accepting challenges, no comments on bloodlines, honor rights, or ceremonial blades. Smile if spoken to, bow when I kick your ankle. You're really worried I'll start a war over small talk?" "With you, always." Cade almost smiled. "Good, means you care." She rolled her eyes, but her tail, long, pale, furred like most Varens, flicked once behind her in a nervous arc. "I care about surviving today." At the gate, the guards snapped their halberds upright. A procession approached from the lower plaza, nobles in lacquered armor, musicians with crescent flutes, attendants carrying glowing braziers, and behind them the imperial carriage with its obsidian frame and floating wheel rings that hummed instead of rattled. "The bride's family," Sima whispered. "Stand straight." Cade straightened. Princess Erilyn of the Varen crown stepped from the carriage. He had seen her twice before, each time from a distance, each time surrounded by enough protocol to make conversation impossible. Today she wore a white ceremonial mantle woven with metal thread constellations. The fabric spilled from her shoulders like starlight poured into cloth. A narrow circlet rested at her brow, and under it her expression was composed, almost serene. Almost. Cade had spent enough years in fighting pits, military camps, and diplomatic waiting rooms to recognize controlled fear. It looked like stillness carved too sharp. As the crowd bowed, she lifted her gaze, and for half a second her eyes met his. Recognition flashed there. Then it was gone behind royal poise. The groom arrived moments later. Lord Varric of House Draven, war hero, fleet commander, and by every rumor Cade had heard, a man who smiled only when something broke. He dismounted from a black grav mount, armor polished, mirror bright, ceremonial blade at his hip. His people cheered louder than the musicians played. Varric bowed to the emperor. Emperor Surin, father of the bride, ruler of 7 moons, stood atop the terrace in armor old enough to be history and sharp enough to remain relevant. He was broad, gray at the temples, and carried his age like a veteran carries a blade, visible, respected, still dangerous. The emperor raised his hand. "Today," boomed the herald, voice amplified through crystal towers, "House Surin and House Draven bind their blood beneath the witness sky." The crowd roared. Cade felt Sima nudge his ankle. Bow, he bowed. And as he lowered his head, he noticed three things at once: a sniper glint on the eastern spire, a second on the chapel roofline, and Princess Erilyn's fingers, hidden in her sleeves, curled not toward her bouquet but toward the hilt line where a blade should have been. Something was wrong. The wedding began with songs. Varen's ceremony used harmony as oath binding, choirs singing ancestral names, each verse sealing a clause of alliance. Cade understood maybe one word in 10, but he understood tone. The opening hymns were clear, formal. By the fourth verse, the altos from House Draven were pushing tempo, forcing speed. Not enough for outsiders to catch, enough for insiders to read as pressure. Beside him, Sima went very still. "What?" he whispered from the side of his mouth. "Draven altered the order," she murmured, eyes forward. "They advanced the inheritance stanza before mutual guardianship." Cade frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning they're claiming succession weight before marriage completion, in public. That legal? Not unless both parties assent." He watched the princess. She did not assent, she didn't speak at all. Lord Varric stepped close to her, too close for ceremony, and took her wrist. To the crowd, maybe it looked guiding. To Cade, who had seen control disguised as affection in too many places, it looked like a restraint with jewelry. "Can you stop this?" he asked. Sima's laugh was brittle. "I'm a junior linguist from House Tareth. I can translate your threats into 6 dialects. I cannot stop imperial politics." The officiant raised a silver bowl for the blood-binding drop. Varric drew his ceremonial knife. And then the first shot cracked. Not a pulse rifle blast. A kinetic slug, old tech, armor-piercing, designed for one thing: make sure no shielded noble walked away. The bullet shattered the bowl in the officiant's hands. Silver fragments sprayed. Music died mid-note. A second shot punched through the chapel pillar behind the emperor. Panic exploded. Nobles dove, guards shouted, guests screamed as lanterns toppled and braziers spat sparks into silk banners. The sniper on the eastern spire fired again, and this one took a captain through the throat. "Down!" Sima yelled. Cade didn't go down. He moved forward. He vaulted the front balustrade, landed hard on black stone, and sprinted straight into the collapsing center line between Royal Guard and House Draven militia. "Mercer!" Sima screamed behind him. He ignored her. Varric had pulled the princess in front of him as a shield. Cade saw it in one clean instant. Varric's left arm locked around Erilyn's shoulders, blade at her neck, not pressed but close enough, while his right hand signaled his men. This wasn't an assassination attempt from outside. It was a coup wrapped in wedding silk. "House Draven!" Varric shouted. "Protect the line!" His militia surged, not toward the snipers but toward the emperor. Cade grabbed a fallen guard shield, slid behind a toppled pillar as another shot hammered stone where his head had been, then sprang back out and slammed the shield edge first into the nearest Draven soldier's knee joint. The soldier dropped. Cade stripped his shock baton and used it like a club, 2 fast strikes to helmet and wrist. A pulse burst scorched the air by his ear. He ducked, rolled, came up inside another fighter's reach, and drove his shoulder into the alien's sternum with enough force to crack armor plating. They hit the floor together. Cade headbutted once, decisive, and moved. Everything narrowed, noise fading to timing, bodies to vectors, distance to survival geometry. Old instincts took over. Get to the hostage. Break the control point. Move. Varric dragged Erilyn toward the rear archway where a dropship was descending through smoke. Cade intercepted 2 militia guards at the stairs. First one swung high, predictable. Cade stepped inside, trapped the arm, elbowed the throat seam, and used the momentum to throw the fighter down the steps. Second came low with a blade. Cade kicked the wrist, took a shallow cut along his own forearm, ignored it, then slammed baton to temple. Down, he reached the archway. Varric grinned when he saw him. The pet human. His translator rendered it with perfect contempt. Erilyn's eyes flashed warning. "Don't!" Varric shoved her aside and lunged. He was fast, faster than Cade expected in ceremonial armor. The noble blade hissed in silver arcs meant to wound then finish. Cade retreated half a step, another, letting Varric commit to the pattern, watching shoulders not steel. Thrust. Feint. Reverse cut. Cade caught the reverse cut on the baton shaft, felt it split, and abandoned the broken weapon. Varric smiled wider. "Unarmed," Varric said. "How tragic." Cade kicked a fallen shield up from the ground with his heel, caught it by the strap, and drove forward. The impact slammed Varric into the arch column. Blade skittered across stone. Varric snarled and hammered a gauntleted fist into Cade's jaw. White sparks burst in Cade's vision. He answered with two body shots and a rising elbow that snapped Varric's head back. The noble's armor absorbed part of it. Not enough. Varric staggered, reached for a sidearm. Erilyn moved first. She drew a hidden dagger from inside her mantle and buried it through the gap at Varric's elbow joint. He screamed, gun clattering away. Cade grabbed Varric's collar and slammed him face first into the arch pillar. "Done?" Cade asked. Varric spat blood and tried to bite him. Cade slammed him again. "Now done." Imperial guards arrived in a rush, weapons raised, half pointed at Varric, half pointed at Cade. The Emperor emerged through smoke, armor scorched, one shoulder bleeding. For a heartbeat, everyone waited for his command. Surin looked from his daughter to Varric restrained on his knees to Cade standing with blood on his sleeve and someone else's blade at his feet. "Seize all Draven officers," the Emperor said, voice like iron dragged across stone. "Alive if possible." Guards moved. Surin's gaze fixed on Cade. "And bring me the human." They brought him to a war room, not a prison. That worried him more. The chamber was circular, walls carved with tactical maps of old campaigns. A hollow table glowed in the center, presently showing the palace district in red threat overlays. Two medics worked on the Emperor's shoulder while advisors whispered at the edges like nervous ghosts. Sima stood near the door, pale and furious. "You absolute catastrophe," she hissed when Cade entered. "I told you not to start anything." "I didn't start it." "You finished it in front of half the Empire," seemed efficient. She looked like she wanted to strangle him and hug him in equal measure. The Emperor dismissed the medics, stepped down from the dais and stood directly in front of Cade. Up close, Surin's presence felt less like rank and more like gravity. "You are Cade, Mercer of Earth," the Emperor said. "Yes." "Former contract fighter." Cade tilted his head. "Former is generous." "Decorated in 2 border actions, discharged after refusing an unlawful command." Cade glanced at Sima. She looked equally surprised. Imperial intelligence did homework. "I did what I thought was right," Cade said. Surin held his gaze. "Today you did it again." Silence stretched. Then the side doors opened and Princess Erilyn entered without ceremony, no attendants, no veil. She had changed into a plain dark tunic. Dried blood marked one sleeve. Her circlet was gone. She walked straight to her father. "Varric confessed," she said, "not fully but enough. He intended to force the binding, then declare you unfit after the snipers took your counsel. House Draven had fleet support." The advisors erupted in whispered panic. Surin lifted one hand. Quiet returned. Erilyn turned to Cade. You saw the snipers before anyone else. Two positions, Cade said. There might have been a third spotter. There was, said Surin, caught trying to cross the aqueduct. Erilyn studied Cade for a long moment. Why did you run toward us? Cade shrugged, then regretted it as pain lit his jaw. Because he held you like cargo, didn't seem like a wedding to me. One corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Surin stepped back to the hollow table. House Draven is not finished. Their commanders will claim Varric acted under duress or that he was framed. They will call this chaos. They will test borders by nightfall. Then hit first, Cade said before he could stop himself. Every advisor in the room snapped to stare at him. Sima whispered, please stop giving military advice to emperors. But Surin gestured, speak. Cade approached the hollow table, acutely aware of how absurd this was. He was a human nobody in a room of imperial power. Yet the map was familiar in a universal way. Choke points, supply lines, pride points disguised as strategic assets. Don't hit their worlds, Cade said. Hit their narrative. Publicly release Varric's confession. Show footage of him using the princess as shield. Offer amnesty to Draven units that stand down in 6 hours. Then lock their command relays and seize fuel depots. No martyrs, just no fuel, no comms, no myth. An older general bared his teeth in disdain. And we should trust a pit fighter's politics. Cade met his gaze. No, trust your logistics. Coups run on stories and ships. Starve both. The Emperor looked at Erilyn. She nodded once. It will split their support. Surin turned to his council. Do it. Advisors scattered into action. Sima leaned close to Cade and whispered, you just rewrote Imperial response doctrine. Sorry. I'm not sure that's enough apology. By sunset, 3 Draven flotillas had surrendered. By midnight, 2 more. By dawn, House Draven's Grand Citadel transmitted a formal plea for negotiated terms. The Empire did not sleep that night. Neither did Cade. He sat on a balcony outside the guest quarters, wrapped in a blanket he pretended he didn't need, watching traffic lines thread the sky in blue and white. Varen moons hung low and bright, silvering the palace towers. He heard soft footsteps and didn't turn. Most people celebrate after helping prevent civil war, Erilyn said, taking the seat beside him. Most people weren't invited to the war room after crashing a wedding. She laughed quietly. In plain clothes, without the architecture of royalty around her, she seemed younger and somehow more formidable. They're calling you the Gatebreaker in the lower city, she said. That's a terrible nickname. There are worse. One district calls you the Groom of Ruin, Cade groaned. Absolutely not. Erilyn leaned on the railing, watching sky traffic. My father wants to honor you tomorrow. You already did, I'm alive. He wants more than medals. Cade glanced at her. How much more? She was silent for a few breaths. Varric's betrayal did more than fail a wedding, she said. It proved what the court has whispered for years, that I am a symbol, not a decision-maker, a piece to be exchanged for stability. You stabbed a coup leader through the elbow in front of witnesses. Hard to call that symbolic. That is exactly why they are afraid now. She folded her hands. If I choose my own alliance openly, I break a tradition older than the Empire. Cade felt where this was heading and tried unsuccessfully to headbutt destiny out of the way. Erilyn, she looked at him, steady and direct. I am not asking for romance on command, Cade. I am asking whether you would consider a political bond with me, a formal one, a marriage covenant. He stared at her. Somewhere below, a patrol siren wailed and faded. That's not small," he said finally. "No, you barely know me. I know enough. You run toward danger when everyone else calculates angles. You refuse cruel orders. You fight like survival is communal, not personal. And when you had every chance to leverage my debt, you did not." Cade rubbed a hand over his face. "Where I come from, people will say I married a crown." She gave a thin smile. "Where I come from, people will say I married a weapon." He barked out a laugh despite himself. "That's somehow worse." "Perhaps." Her expression softened. "I'm giving you truth, not poetry. If you refuse, I will understand. If you accept, your life changes forever." He looked out over the city. He thought of Earth alleys and contract rings and a dozen short-term jobs that had taught him never to root, never to belong. He thought of Varric's hand on Erilyn's wrist, of Surin bleeding but unbowed, of Sima cursing him in 3 dialects while checking if he was hurt. Belonging had always felt like a trap. This didn't. "Do I get to negotiate terms?" he asked. Erilyn's eyes brightened. Aggressively. "Then yes," he said, "on one condition." She arched a brow. "Name it." "No more wedding snipers." "Done." They shook on it like soldiers signing a field truce. The court nearly imploded the next morning. Word spread before breakfast, as it always does in palaces where secrets are just gossip wearing jewelry. By the time Cade entered the Hall of Petitions, every noble with a pulse had arrived to witness history or sabotage it. He walked beside Erilyn in ceremonial attire tailored overnight to fit his human frame. The coat was black with silver trim and imperial sigils at the collar. He felt like he was impersonating someone expensive. Sima stood behind them in official translator regalia, expression fixed in professional neutrality that fooled no one who knew her. At the far end of the hall, Emperor Surin sat the throne beneath the witness sky dome, daylight pouring through crystal panels in shards of blue. The herald struck the floor with a staff. "Princess Erilyn Surin requests imperial sanction for covenant bond with Cade Mercer of Earth." Gasps rippled through the chamber. A duke in red armor stepped forward immediately. "This is impossible. He has no house, no bloodline, no territorial claim." Cade muttered, "I have 2 boots and a headache." Sima coughed to hide a laugh. Erilyn addressed the court before her father could respond. House Draven sought to seize this empire through forced bond and murder. Cade Mercer prevented that at cost to himself and with no promise of reward. If bloodline is your measure of worth, then your measure failed us yesterday." The Duke bristled. "Tradition. Tradition nearly crowned a traitor," Erilyn snapped. Murmurs surged. Another counselor stepped up, older, colder. "Even if sanction is possible, a foreign consort introduces succession chaos." Surin rose from the throne. When he spoke, his voice carried without amplification. Succession chaos came from arrogance, not origin. The empire survives because loyalty outranked lineage when it mattered most. He descended the steps, stopped before Cade, and drew his ceremonial blade. Every guard in the hall stiffened. Surin reversed the blade and offered the hilt to Cade. "By authority of the witness sky," said the Emperor, "I grant Cade Mercer the mantle of imperial shield and recognize him as bonded consort to Princess Erilyn, pending completion of covenant rites." Silence. Then Sima, unable to help herself, whispered, "Congratulations. You've been promoted to impossible." Cade took the blade. He knelt. "Your Majesty," he said, voice rough but steady, "I can't promise perfection." Surin's eyes were flint and storm-like. "Good. Perfect men make brittle kingdoms. Promise me this instead. Stand when it counts. Cade looked up. I can do that. The Emperor extended his hand. Cade stood and took it. The hall erupted, half applause, half outrage, all history. Covenant rights on Vera were not private affairs. They were legal, spiritual, and military declarations braided into one public act. The second ceremony took place 3 days later, under layered security and an obscene number of anti-sniper drones. No one complained about the drones. The plaza that had seen blood now bloomed with lantern trees, mirrored water channels, and braided ribbons of light projected across the air. Citizens filled every terrace, not because they agreed, but because they wanted to witness whatever came next. Cade and Erilyn stood before the witness arch. Surin presided. Sima translated official clauses into Terran standard for interstellar record, and representatives of major houses signed the covenant tablets one by one. Some signed grudgingly, some signed proudly. A few didn't sign at all and made sure everyone noticed. Let them, Cade thought. When the final oath came, he and Erilyn stepped forward together. Surin addressed them both. Name your vow. Erilyn spoke first. I vow to rule beside strength that listens, and to challenge power when it forgets who it serves. Cade swallowed. Thousands watched. Billions would stream this by nightfall. He spoke anyway. I vow to protect this family and this people without turning either into a cage. I won't be your trophy human, and I won't be your blunt instrument. I'll stand where I'm needed, tell the truth when it hurts, and fight only when there is no better way. The plaza held its breath. Then Surin struck the arch with his blade. Crystal tones rang like bells across the city. So witnessed. The crowd answered with a roar that shook banners loose. Erilyn slipped a ring, no, not a ring, a thin metal band etched with shifting constellations onto his hand. He did the same for her, no kiss for spectacle. That wasn't their way. Instead, she pressed her forehead briefly to his, warrior to warrior, promise to promise. Sima wiped her eyes and pretended it was dust. Being named the Emperor's son-in-law did not make life easier. It made it louder. For weeks, Cade bounced between tactical briefings, etiquette training, joint appearances, and the sort of banquets where one wrong fork could cause a diplomatic incident. He learned which nobles smiled with teeth, which generals respected directness, and which corridor alcoves had the best acoustics for overhearing plots. He also learned he liked working with Erilyn. She was relentless in meetings, patient with civilians, terrifyingly precise in negotiations, and occasionally feral when paperwork got stupid. She taught him court language. He taught her how security teams think under ambush stress. They disagreed often and honestly. It worked. House Draven remnants made 2 last plays, one cyber sabotage on orbital docks, one attempted prison break for Varric. Both failed. On the night the second failed, Cade and Surin stood on the same balcony where Erilyn had first made her offer. The Emperor handed Cade 2 cups of bitter leaf tea. "You are still alive," Surin said. "I begin to suspect competence." Cade accepted the cup. High praise. They watched patrol lights drift across the skyline. After a while, Surin said, "When Erilyn was young, she asked me how to choose whom to trust. I told her, trust the one who gets more careful when given power." Cade frowned into his tea. "Did I pass?" Surin took a measured sip. "You argued against orbital bombardment when angry commanders demanded spectacle. You insisted surrendered Draven crews receive fair hearings. You made 3 houses furious and 2 admirals embarrassed." He looked at Cade with something like approval. "Yes," said the Emperor, "you passed." Months later, children in lower market districts played a game called Gate Breaker. One kid pretended to be the princess with a hidden dagger. Another played the trader groom and always overacted. The bravest kid had to vault a crate and shout in badly accented Terran, "No more wedding snipers." Sima heard it first and laughed so hard she dropped her datapad. Cade pretended to hate the game. Erilyn pretended not to know all the rules. The Empire remained complicated, argumentative, imperfect, alive. And in the official registry of the Varen Crown, under the line recording the emergency covenant born from a broken wedding and a failed coup, one notation remained in older script: Cade Mercer of Earth, recognized by Emperor Surin as son by law, shield by deed. On difficult days, Cade would read that line and remember the drums before dawn, the smoke in the archway, and the moment a life without roots offered him one. Not because he won a fight, because when it mattered, he chose to stand. And this time, he was not standing alone.